Hi, everyone. Great to see you again this week. I wonder if you ever think about or wonder how proactive you should be, how much you should try and push forward situations. Should you be aggressive with your ambition? You know, some personalities find this a bit more natural than others. Will go right into their boss and say, I want a promotion, high risk but high reward. Or instead, should you be a bit more passive? Should you focus on the work that you do, focus on the things you can control, and then let things just naturally take their course? Well, last week, we learned about how God is at work in everything, even in the little details, behind the scenes, the seeming coincidences. God is at work, working things together to show us his love and grace. But if we believe that, does that make us just kind of passive and say, trusting God means sitting back and just letting things happen because he's in control? Like the Carrie Underwood song is Jesus Take the Wheel, right? Or the common meme says, let go and let God. Is it like that? Well, what we see in chapter 3 here is the characters aren't waiting around being passive. But we also don't see just selfish ambition. For the characters in this chapter, their confidence in God's goodness and his control lead them not to resigned passivity, but to bold action. So let me just recap real quick. If you haven't been here with us or need a reminder, in chapter 1, we saw Naomi and her family flee Israel because there's a famine and go to Moab. And while they're there, Naomi's husband and both her sons die tragically. And so she decides to go back home to Israel with a bitter heart. She tells her daughters-in-law to go back to Moab, find a new home, make a new life. But Ruth insists that she's going to be faithful to Naomi and go back with her. And she will trust in the God of Israel. And then chapter 2, Ruth goes out to find food, and she just so happens to come across Boaz's field. And it's not a coincidence, but God's been working this together, and Boaz shows amazing kindness to Ruth and Naomi, providing them with food, with protection. And Naomi recognizes all this as God's kindness to them. So that brings us to chapter 3. So let's look now at Naomi's ambiguous plan in verse 1. So some time had passed now, and it's almost to the end of the harvest season. And so Naomi and Ruth, they've enjoyed the kindness of Boaz. They've been eating from his field, but they're still poor widows. And so when the harvest ends, they're going to be left in the same position they were to start with. There won't be much food. So Naomi comes up with a plan. Look down with me at verse 1. It says, one day, Ruth's mother-in-law said to her, my daughter, I must find a home for you where you will be well provided for. Now, I think it's interesting that just at the end of the last chapter, Naomi has recognized that God has never stopped showing kindness to them. But here she says, I must find a home for you. It's interesting that even though Naomi believes that God is working, even through the little details, she doesn't sit back and say, let's just wait and see what happens. She's proactive in making her plans. But I wonder what you think. Is this a good example of someone trusting God and work through the plans? Or is she, frustrated with God and taking matters into her own hands, saying, I must do it because God's taking too long? I don't know. What do you think? I'm not too sure. I wonder if maybe the details of her plan might clear things up. Look down at verse 2. Boaz, with whose women you've been working, is a relative of ours. Tonight he will be winnowing barley on the threshing floor. So wash, put on perfume, and get dressed in your best clothes. Then go down to the threshing floor, but don't let him know you're there until he has finished eating and drinking. When he lies down, note the place where he's lying, then go and uncover his feet and lie down. He will tell you what to do. Now, a little bit of background information might help clear up some of this. It's come up a couple times, this idea of a redeemer. It was mentioned in the last chapter, it comes up later, and the Israelites would have known exactly what's going on here. But we use the word redeem oftentimes when someone goes through something really bad and then they do something good to redeem themselves. But we also can use redeem in the sense of like paying off a debt, like you can redeem a mortgage. And it's more like this is what we're talking about, like paying off a debt. Because the Israelites had a law and a custom that said if someone has gotten themselves into debt and has to sell their land or even sell themselves into slavery if it's gotten really bad, then a close relative could redeem them, pay off their debts, buy them back from slavery. But it also meant that if a woman's husband died and she's in a difficult situation, she could be redeemed, meaning that the family member could marry her and then provide for her, which I know seems pretty weird for us to think about someone marrying their brother-in-law, but we talked about last week that in this society, a woman who's been widowed would have been extremely vulnerable without a husband for protection and provision. So it's looking out for Ruth, and there's this possibility for a redeemer that could pay off her debts, provide and protect, and even marry her to give her a home and a family and a future. Another relevant thing to know is that Ruth is a Moabite, and sadly, the Moabites had a reputation for sexual promiscuity. And so with this in the background, what do you think? Is this a good plan? Her sneaking around in the middle of the night, uncovering his feet, lying down, and then just waiting to see what he says. I don't know. Is that a good plan? I mean, there's a couple good things about it. She's being proactive. She's not waiting around. I think that's good. She's putting her trust in Boaz, who we've seen is a man of character, so I think that's good. But there's some really big risks, right? What if Boaz does think she's being promiscuous? You know, he's a noble man. He might think she's acting like a prostitute or something. He would say, well, get away from me. That would be terrible. Or maybe even worse, what if he mistook it for a sexual advance and he didn't shoo her away? That would be even worse. I don't know about you, but I'm not a big fan of this plan. I don't think it's immoral, definitely ambiguous. But the one thing I think we can take away is that Naomi's confidence in God, that he's in control and he's kind and he's working behind the scenes, it doesn't make Naomi lazy or passive. But she takes initiative. She takes responsibility for Ruth. Her plan may not be the best plan, but it's the one she's got. She's going to move forward with whatever wisdom and cunning she has and then trust God to work through it. Imagine at work, say you're in the design industry, imagine you got put on a project with one of the best designers in London. And they're not just the best because they have great ideas, but they're great project managers as well. They know how to use everyone's strengths well together, overcome snags in the project. Now, if you had the opportunity to work on this project with this person, would their talent cause you to work less hard? Would you sit back and say, well, they don't really need me, it's going to work out fine no matter what I do? Well, of course not. You wouldn't do that. You'd want to work hard because you know it's going to work out well. Your confidence that it's going to turn out great doesn't make you sit back and say, well, I won't do anything. It inspires you to be more proactive. You want to give your best effort not because you're afraid it's going to fail, but because you're confident that it's going to work. So I think for us, when we're faced with difficult circumstances in life, face up to them. Be proactive. Make plans. But don't make plans because you're afraid that God won't come through. Make plans and commit them to God because you're confident that he will come through. Let's look next at Ruth's bold request in verse 5. So Ruth now, she shows this amazing loyalty and trust in Naomi. In verse 5, she says to Naomi, I will do whatever you say. That's her response to this ambiguous plan. And she does. She goes forward with it. She sneaks in the middle of the night. She washes and wears perfume. She uncovers his feet and lies down. And in verse 8, in the middle of the night, something startled the man. He turned, and there was a woman lying at his feet. Who are you? He asked. I am your servant Ruth, she said. Spread the corner of your garment over me, since you are a guardian redeemer. Even though Naomi's plan is ambiguous, Ruth here, as soon as she gets the chance, she clears up the ambiguity. You can't tell in English, but the word for the corner of the garment is the same word for wing, like a bird's wing. And if you remember in the last chapter, Boaz had told Ruth that when she came back to Israel, she had come under the wing of the Lord, like this picture of a mother bird protecting its chicks under the wing. And so Ruth says, take your wing and cover me. So she's saying, okay, Boaz, why don't you put your faith into action and do what you say should be done? It's bold, isn't it? Even more than that, she's asking him to marry her. If it wasn't clear, she adds, do this because you're a guardian redeemer for our family. So she's saying, Boaz, you have this power to cancel our debts, provide a home for me, and to marry me so we can be together. So do that. It's incredibly bold, right? I mean, even today, it's a little unorthodox for the woman to ask the man to marry her, but not totally uncommon. But here, it's extremely bold. Not only is she a woman asking a man, but she's a foreigner asking an Israelite. She's poor asking the owner of the field to marry her. Where does she get this boldness? Well, first, it's because she's a noble woman. So down in verse 11, Boaz says, all the people know that you're a noble woman. And what does that mean? Well, we've seen Ruth, she's fiercely loyal to Naomi. She's a hard worker. She's been working out in the fields. She's willing to take big risks for her family. She's not afraid to stand up and ask for what she wants. She's even taking the lead in the relationship. I think today, oftentimes when we talk about these patriarchal societies in the Bible, we assume that they're always telling women to be quiet and stay at home. But that's not the noble woman that the Bible's talking about here. She's strong, she's bold, courageous. Ruth is a noble woman. But she's also bold because she has seen that Boaz is trustworthy. In the last chapter, Boaz had told her, don't go anywhere else looking for food. Stay in my fields and I'll provide for you everything you need. And so she trusted him then, and now she's ready to commit all the way. Boaz, redeem me. I want to be with you. Isn't it true that any committed relationship feels like a big risk? Especially romantic relationships. You put yourself out there if you're going to ask someone to go out on a date. What if they don't feel the same way? And then you're out on the date and you reach out to hold their hand, but what if they pull away? It feels like a big risk. And then in marriage, you're completely opening up yourself to someone else, to be completely known, no secrets. What if they don't like what they see? What if they change their mind? It feels risky, doesn't it? Well, I think this is how it feels to become a Christian. If you're not a Christian and you're wondering what is that like when people convert to Christianity, it's a lot like a faith here. It takes a lot of courage to admit that you're in desperate need of God's help. And it's scary to put yourself out there and open yourself up to God. Will he love me? Even when he sees my heart and my sinful thoughts, will he take care of me if I put my life in his hands? But she takes that risk because she's seen what kind of man Boaz is. And I wonder if you've seen what kind of man Jesus is. Is he the kind of man you want to be with? I wonder what it would look like for you today to take a risk trusting in Jesus. If you aren't a Christian, maybe it's praying and asking God, if you're real, would you show yourself to me? Would you help me believe? Maybe it'd be reading one of the gospel accounts in the Bible of Jesus' life, maybe with a Christian friend. Talk to me or Woody afterwards if you'd be interested in something like that. If you are a Christian, maybe it's offering to read the Bible with a non-Christian friend, or just trusting in God in the difficult situations in your life. Whatever it is, take the risk to trust in Jesus because he is trustworthy. Let's look lastly at Boaz's amazing promise here in verse 10. So Ruth says, spread your wing, marry me, redeem me, and then she holds her breath. How's he going to respond? Verse 10, the Lord bless you, my daughter. Oh, man, the fear that he might misinterpret, what's going to happen, the fear's gone. He says, this kindness is greater than that which you showed earlier. What's the kindness that she showed earlier? It's the loyalty and the faithfulness that she's shown to Naomi. To come back to Israel with her and commit herself to her. He's saying, this kindness that you're showing me is even greater than that. She hasn't just looked out for herself and got married to whoever would take her, but she's committed herself to him. She wants to be with him. And Boaz sees her request for redemption as a kindness to him. Isn't that surprising? She's the one in need, asking for help, asking him to redeem her. But Boaz, he doesn't act like he's doing her some big favor. He doesn't act like she's going to owe him one if she does this. He sees it as kindness to him. In verse 11, he says, "My daughter, do not be afraid. I will do for you all that you ask." I will. I want to. Isn't that wonderful? I read this week that there was a church in the U.S. called Crossroads in Ohio, and they paid off $46 million in medical debt of strangers. They partnered with a nonprofit medical debt relief organization and just paid these people's debts off. One of the beneficiaries received a letter in the post that said, "Congratulations, your debt has been paid because someone loves you and there's a God that has not forgotten about you." The recipient said, "I received this bright yellow envelope and started to throw it away, but when I saw that it said your medical debt has been paid, I thought, seriously? Wait a minute. When I read it, I got emotional because I had been so needing a break with my debt." And the church was happy to do it. They saw it as a joy to be able to bless these people and provide for their needs, to pay off their debts. And with Boaz and Ruth, it does cost Boaz to redeem Ruth. He has to support Naomi and Ruth, buy their fields off, pay off their debts. Marrying Ruth, it does cost him, but he's happy to do it. He's a willing redeemer. And we have a willing redeemer in Jesus Christ. He's paid the ultimate cost. He gave his life to redeem us. He paid off the debt of our sin that we had no way to pay for ourselves. He wiped it all away. He's seen our need and he invites us into his family safely. He offers new life eternally with him in this perfectly loving relationship. And he didn't do it begrudgingly. He wanted to do it. And he wants to do that for you today. When we come to faith in him, it can feel like a risk because we're putting ourselves out there like Ruth, admitting our need and asking for help. But Jesus wants to help you. He wants to redeem you. I mean, Ruth didn't know for sure how Boaz was going to respond. She had to ask and then wait to see what happened. But for us, there's no question with Jesus. He's already died to redeem us. We already know that he wants to. For us, it's more like the marriage proposal is already on the table, and it's up to us, are we going to accept? Will you trust in Jesus? When we see God's kindness, that he's in control and even working behind the scenes in everything, it doesn't make us passive. When we see that he's given his life for us, it makes us even more bold to act, to take risks, to trust God, make plans to show love to others, but most of all, to come to Jesus and ask him to redeem you. He's willing, he wants to. He's already done it. So trust in him. Let me pray for us. Heavenly Father, thank you that you are a willing redeemer for us, that you have given your life so that we can be with you forever. I pray that you help us to be bold in faith, to trust in you with our whole lives. We ask this for your name's sake. Amen.